Hi, I am M. Jagadish, Associate Professor in CSE Department. Now, in this session, we discuss about inheritance. And we already know the object-oriented programming concepts. Those are nothing but like class, object, polymorphism, inheritance, dynamic binding, data abstraction, data encapsulation. All these are nothing but object-oriented programming concepts. Among those object-oriented programming concepts, one of the important object-oriented programming concept is nothing but inheritance. Inheritance plays the major role in object-oriented programming concept. What actually the inheritance means? This inheritance is going to define a new class in terms of another class. Now, what makes to define a new class in another class in the or in name of another class that indicates when we are going to define a new class in terms of another class, then it makes easier to create and maintain an application. If you are going to develop one particular application in real world, in order to create or develop the application, or in order to maintain the application related to the real world application, then it is easy in order to maintain or create by using of the inheritance. In which manner that indicates here, by means of inheritance, we are going to define a new class by means of another class. What actually defining a new class by means of another class or in terms of another class that indicates, it is going to specify that the major advantage that is nothing but reuse. We are going to reuse the codes. We are going to reuse the function or the data members which are already there in the earlier class. Now, what actually the reuse concept? We go in depth. Assume there is a one class which consists of a 10 numbers or 10 lines of codes. Now, we just go to define a new class. Now, in the new class, we just go to specify 30 lines of codes. And these 30 lines of code includes the first 1 to 10 lines of codes. And again, you just go to define one more class in which we just go to specify 50 lines of codes. And among those 50 lines of codes, 1 to 30 lines of code which is related to the second class. See, here, the same lines of codes you are going to specify again and again in multiple classes like class 2 and class C. Instead of writing the same lines of codes by multiple number of times, you simply reuse the codes whenever it is required. This reusing of the codes will make to implement the application easily, and also this reusing of the codes is going to done to execute or implement your application fastly. That's what actually the inheritance means. So instead of writing the same code by multiple number of times when you just go to create a class, then simply you are just go to inherit the codes or inherit the data members of the existing class by means of inheritance. If once you inherit the code or the data members or the data functions, then automatically you just go to specify that you are reusing the code which is already there. No need to write or no need to define again and again. This is the major advantage of inheritance. That's what you just go to specify the power of inheritance. When you just go to work with the inheritance, then definitely in the inheritance, at least there must be two types of classes. Those two types of classes are nothing but base class and derived class. Whatever the first class or the existing class is there, we can call that class as a base class. And whatever the class that you are going to define as a new class, then you can call that is nothing but the derived class. So here, now we just go to define the inheritance with this. The inheritance is nothing but process of deriving a new class from existing class. Deriving a new class from existing class. That new class we can call as a derived class, and existing class is called as a base class. Now, when you derive a new class from existing class, then all the features of the base class will also be there in the derived class. Whatever the features that are there, like data members or the data functions. Whatever the features that are there in the base class, those things will also be available in the derived class. And apart from this, you can also add new features to the derived class. So this what actually the inheritance means. Now look at the advantage of inheritance. I already specified the major advantage is nothing but reusability. You just go to reuse the codes whenever required. So maximum in many situations, in many cases, you are going to reuse the codes, which makes by means of inheritance. And when once we just go to specify, you are using the inheritance concepts. Now the first class, which we can call as a base class, we just go to define the base class first. And this base class is going to compile only once. It is not necessary to compile again and again whenever it is going to execute or whenever we are going to use. The base class will be compiled only once. And when we are going to use, it is not like that it is going to recompile. And one more thing, when you are using the concept of inheritance, that indicates you are inheriting the properties of one class to another class. So that indicates you are going to acquire the properties of one class to as many as derived classes, not only to a one derived class. Based on the application, you may create multiple number of derived classes. So when you are creating multiple number of derived classes, for all these derived classes, you are going to acquire the properties from base classes. You are acquiring the properties from base classes. And whenever it is requiring, whenever it is needed or required, you can add additional features also to each of the derived classes whenever the application demands. So these are nothing much the advantages of inheritance. Now we look at one more, that is nothing much how we are going to derive a new class. In which manner we are going to derive a new class. So here we are just going to specify a general format for implementing the inheritance or for deriving a new class. Now what is that particular one means? First of all, start with a keyword that is nothing but a class. Class, derived class name, then colon, access specifier, base class name. What actually the meaning of this that indicates? Derived class name is nothing but name of the derived class. And base class name is nothing but the name of the base class. This separates the difference between the derived class and the base class. And the access specifiers may be a private or public or protected. You can specify any of the access specifier here. And we already discussed in the previous session what happens when we are going to use the access specifier as a private or public. Now again we recall here. Now look at this, take the example. Now class sample colon, here I just go to specify the access specifier is public. Then the next one is nothing but base class, that is nothing but my class. Here my class is the base class and sample is nothing but derived class. That indicates we are deriving a sample class from my class, that too in public mode. That indicates all the features of my class will be available in sample class. So that what actually the meaning of inheriting a class from another class or deriving a class from another class in a specific mode. Here it is public. Now look at one more. The example. Now here I am defining a class. The name of the class is nothing much my class. I am defining a class my class. In the private mode, I declare the variable or the data member int x. Now in the public section, I define a function my class. Here the function is nothing but a constructor. Why? Because both class name and function name both are same. So it is a constructor. And in this constructor, I am specifying a value 0 to x. And then I am defining one more function f by specifying one parameter n1. Now in this function, I just use the statement x is equal to n1 into 5. That indicates the value of n1 is multiplies by 5 and the result is stored in X variable. Then again one more function, void outputs I am defining. In this function, simply I am printing the value of X on the output screen. Then close the class. This entire is nothing but my class, and here we can treat this as a base class. Then come to the next one. Now I am deriving a new class sample from base class, that is nothing but my class, that too in public modes. So class sample colon public my class. Then the open brace indicates beginning of the class. Then this is the beginning of sample class. In the private section, I am declaring the variable or data member, that is int s1. In the public section, I am defining the constructor because both class name and function name both are same, so it is a constructor. And then here in this constructor, I am assigning a value 0 to s1. Then again I am just going to specify the defining of one more function named as f1, void f1. In this, I am using a statement s1 is equal to n1 into 10. That indicates the n1 value is multiplies by 10 and the result value is stored in s1. Then again I am defining one more function, outputs. So in this one, I just go to specify my class scope output. That indicates there is a function named as output in the base class also. So first I just go to make use of output function in the base class. After executing the output function from the base class, then I am going to print the value s1 by means of cout. Then at last close the class. So deriving class is also complete. Come to the next one, that is nothing but main function. Now here I am defining the main function. So as usual, the C++ program starts the execution from main function. In this, the open brace indicates the beginning. Then the first statement is a sample s. Sample is nothing but the derived class. For the derived class, I am declaring the variable s. Then I just go to execute a function s.f1. S.f of 10, sorry, s.f of 10. S.f of 10, that indicates the f is a function which is there in the base class. So even though if it is in the base class, then I am executing the f function by means of derived class objects, because I am acquiring the properties of base class to derived class. That indicates the member functions which are there in the base class will also be available in derived class. So according to that one, I am executing a function f by means of derived object s.f of 10. So s.f of n statement will makes you to execute the function f which is there in base class, this one, f of 10. So that f of 10 function is going to execute this function, and n1 value will be a 10. So n1 into 5, that indicates 10 into 5, that is nothing but 50. So that result value will be stored in x variable, that is nothing much. So 10 into 5, 50 will be stored in x. So x value is 50. So then come to the next statement. So the next statement here is nothing much s dot output. So s dot output, that indicates that output is nothing but a function which is there in the derived class, that is nothing but this one. So when it is going to specify this one, so automatically first it executes this function, my class scope resolution operator output, that indicates it is going to execute the base class function, that is nothing but this one. So here the output function is nothing but this, which is going to print x value. So simply it is going to print the value of x, that is nothing but 50. Then after that, look at this. First statement, it displays the value of 50. Then come to the next one, s dot f1 of 20. So s dot f1 of 20, that indicates it is going to specify which is going to execute the f1 function in derived class. So as usual, it is going to execute the f1 function in the derived class. So the f1 function in the derived class is nothing but this one. So s1 is equal to n1 into 10. So n1, that indicates there the n1 value is 20. 20 into 10, that indicates 200. So s1 value will becomes 200. Then after that, s dot output. So s dot output, that indicates it is going to execute a function which is related to this one. So it is execute now this function. That is nothing but output function in the derived class. So it executes these statements. So it prints the 50 and 200s. So likewise, it is going to execute the single inheritance program. Thank you.